1999 marked a turning point in the wrestling video game landscape when the World Wrestling Federation approached THQ to make a few video games, ostensibly ending a 12-year-long relationship with their previous partner, Acclaim Entertainment, and beginning one with THQ that will result in a long, fruitful relationship that continues to this day. While Nintendo 64 owners would get solid wrestling titles such as WWF WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy, and Dreamcast owners would get a decent home port of the WWF Royal Rumble arcade game before the system was unceremoniously shit-canned, PlayStation owners were graced with WWF Smackdown, the first game in a long line of video games on the PlayStation family that would eventually evolve to the modern-day multi-platform WWE Smackdown vs. Raw series of sports entertainment titles, which would further evolve to the current WWE series. And while recent offerings attempted to portray a more realistic wrestling atmosphere, WWF Smackdown on PS1 opted for a more arcadish, faster-paced gameplay format that generally made the game much easier to get into and arguably more enjoyable than Acclaim's prior offerings. No longer were you shackled to memorizing 10-step button sequences to perform an R-bar or referring to the moves list every 10 seconds or so to recall such combinations. Now all it took was a D-pad direction and a grapple or strike button press and voila! Wrestling holds right out of the box. Want to perform your wrestler's finishing moves such as the Stone Cold Stunner or the People's Elbow? Just fill up your Smackdown meter, get your opponent into proper position, press L1 and BAM! Ripe for the 1-2-3 or knocked out cold by your fierce prowess. It was this simple, clear-cut format that made the game easy to get into and ensured good times to be had by all. And while it's not the deepest wrestling engine you'll find, submission moves don't hold for too long and weight class differences are arbitrary at best, the game flows at a rather decent pace, and in the long run the game is designed with an emphasis on speed and action rather than any semblance of technical wrestling acumen, much like the WWF product of the time. Right off the bat you have multiple match types, singles, tag matches, steel cage matches, Royal Rumble matches, and such. You now have the prerequisite created wrestler mode, which is rather bare bones. All you really do is assign predetermined body parts together to create your superstar, and the customization is virtually non-existent. They also tossed in backstage areas that you can move around in during hardcore matches, and you can take the fight from the ring to the stage to the backstage area and vice versa, which is something you can't even do in the modern iterations of the series. You also have a dedicated season mode which allows you to participate in storylines. The season mode is at its most basic. You partake in one show per month, usually a Raw followed by Smackdown before the eventual pay-per-view. Sometimes you'll even partake in the house show, which is something not evident in current Smackdown vs. Raw games. And every so often a cutscene will pop up to show storylines whether you're in them or not. Every season you play through, you'll earn new parts to build your custom superstars with. No unlockable characters here, you actually have to build them. There's also rankings and belt records, and you can even defend your championships in standard exhibition matches, which is a really nifty feature that still lives on in some form or fashion in the current iterations. God knows we've used plenty of these all day long. This is a pretty packed game so far, a plethora of superstars, match types, options, create your own pay-per-view, title defenses on the fly, backstage brawls, not too shabby. And on top of that, SmackDown's gameplay is pretty effective and intuitive. It's not overly complicated, it's not something that requires a degree in astrophysics to understand. It's simple, responsive, and easy to get into. SmackDown's visual presentation is a bit of a mixed bag. While I'm not the biggest fan of the Acclaim efforts in regards to the gameplay, the character models and arenas in those games did possess a polished look to them. In essence, it resulted in a cleaner looking game. SmackDown sports an overall rougher looking game in regards to the arena and especially the various superstar models whose textures seem particularly grainy from my vantage point at least. I think this was done purposely so that the character models don't appear as blocky as the Acclaim efforts. It's not bad though, the graphics are alright, but it's just something I kind of noticed when playing this, and even thought this back when the game was brand spanking new. The other deals are the entrances, or rather lack thereof. All you get is your superstar posing and walking while their Titantron videos playing in the background. It's a little jarring, a little disappointing considering WrestleMania 2000 on the Nintendo 64 does feature full ring entrances. Well, as full as you were going to get on the N64 I suppose. Even Attitude had full ring entrances, so I don't know what the deal is here. Sadly, it's the same issue as SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, although the series would get full ring entrances once they graced the PlayStation 2. But one step at a time here. Spotty commentary from the past WWF offerings have been dropped in favor of arcadey rock music that plays in the background while matches are in progress. a rather roughshod collection of tunes that are admittedly rather listenable and suits the needs of filling the void. In all honesty though, given the choice between generic rock music and generic commentary tracks, I'd much rather have the generic music. Sometimes generic music is more tolerable to these ears than generic repetitive commentary. Not always, but sometimes. The sound effects are alright, I guess. There's not really much to say about those. You have your... There's no grunts in this, but you do have a ref count and stuff like that, and yeah, it's just fine. Overall, for our first effort, WWF Smackdown turned out pretty damn good and addressed some of the problems that persisted in Acclaim's efforts. Of course, they ended up with some new problems, but those are admittedly minute issues to an otherwise superb first effort. Is this game worth picking up? Well, I guess if you find a copy for a few bucks, I guess you could go for it. It's a pretty good game, well deserving the praise it garnered back in the day, and it's certainly a major improvement over Acclaim's games, which sort of justified the WWF's decision in jumping ship, so to speak. However, while Smackdown was a good start in its own right, the sequel is a slightly better package that we'll look at some other time.